I did.
Call Willmar City Council special meeting to order for Monday, September 30th. Roll call.
Mayor Calvin.
Here.
Councilmember Fagerly.
Here.
Maskey.
Here.
Schwantes. Here. Davis.
Here.
Alvarado.
Here.
Osmus. Here. Plowman.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
It's not on the agenda, but we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item we have is the introduction of new employees. So with that, I'll go to Brian Gramitz, our city administrator. Brian?
Mr. Mayor and city council members, we have tonight 2 new employees that I'd like to introduce to you. Bruce Cochran, the assistant city engineer. Oh, you can do more than that. Why don't you stand up? There's so many chairs in front of you. Yep, and you can walk up to the mic and started, what was it, 2 weeks ago?
It's the 9th, September 9th. So yeah,
Okay.
in 2 weeks.
Yep, 2 weeks. So maybe you want to just, just mention a little bit about your history and we'll go from there.
My name is Bruce Cochran. I'm the assistant city engineer. A little bit of background about me. I've been in the municipal arena at the county and the city level for 25 years. Roughly 12 and a half with Mille Lacs County and roughly 12 and a half with the city of Findlay in Ohio, which is 100 miles northwest of Columbus. I'm registered in 3 states, Minnesota, Michigan, and Ohio. I see many similarities in Willmar that I've seen in other places, so it's kind of interesting to see the same problems and same issues arise that I've seen elsewhere. It makes me feel a little more comfortable. At the city level, I'm familiar with your sanitary sewers, storm sewers, water systems, streets, site plans and subdivisions, so I don't feel like I'm put out of water here with what I've seen so far. I look forward to working with staff, administration, and council to meet the citizens' goals. And my approach is to try to solve things effectively and cost efficiently. Use a little bit of common sense. And in my past experience, I've been experienced with budgets, project development, and administration. And I've maintained a pretty good relationship with my fellow engineers and people at state aid, both at the district level and at the central office. This is a different district than I worked with when I was in Mille Lacs County, but the state aid people have been really good to work with, so I look forward to that. And that's kind of me in a quick nutshell. I don't know if you got any questions, anything more you'd like to know about me?
Councilmember Alvarado.
Thank you for your introduction. I was just wondering, you talked about a town in Ohio.
Yes.
How does that compare population-wise?
It's significantly larger. I think it was in the 30,000s when I was there. It was home of Cooper Tire and Rubber, Marathon Oil. Dow Chemical had a plant there. Ball Metal has a plant. Whirlpool has a plant there. So it's a much more industrialized and a very busy, growing community. We had subdivisions going on for years at a time. And planning commission met twice a month to keep up with the demand. So we were very busy, very, very, very prosperous at the time.
Okay. Well, I was hoping it would be our size or thereabouts, so that's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Fagerly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, welcome. We've been waiting for an assistant for a long time. We need one, so. Are you from Minnesota?
I am
originally?
from Minnesota. I grew up in the western suburbs. I went to North Dakota State University. After I got out of school, I worked for a large commercial contractor that worked around the clock, around the world. Happened to meet somebody when I was in Ohio, and that's where I ended up staying for a while. And due to some misfortunes in the family and some timing issues, I had an opportunity to come back to Minnesota, and I've been back here since 2004.
So do you have any relatives up by Spicer?
I do not.
Okay. So there's a DNR gentleman up there that runs DNR. Dave is the same last name, so
Yeah.
just wondering.
Actually, the last name, my dad's father was adopted and took on the name.
Okay.
I think the blood name is Chapman on that side.
Okay. Well,
Good there, too.
welcome again.
Well, thank you.
Welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you. And we have Alex Hetrick, who is the surveyor and the final piece of the puzzle in the engineering department.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome.
My name is Alex. I'm the new surveyor. Really the new surveyor. I'm just starting out my career. This was kind of a midlife career change for me. I got tired of my old job and went back to school at St. Cloud Tech for surveying, and here I am. First couple weeks have been great. Everybody's been really good to work with, and I'm really enjoying it so far, and a lot of new stuff to learn. But I look forward to just continuing to learn new things every day and improve my skills and serve the community any way I can.
Okay, Council. Welcome. We're glad you're with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things I think that the city council, I think would be interested in knowing is now that we have a full slate of people in our positions, we'll be able to take on more of the design work of our street projects instead of farming them out to a consulting engineer. So the more we can do in-house, the better off we are for both tax purposes and probably efficiencies at this point. So we got a full complement of staff now, so we should be able to be shifting back to doing more of the projects in-house.
Great. Thank you. Welcome.
I think we should do a little,
Yeah.
it's been a while.
Well, you can certainly stick around for the rest of the meeting if you choose, but we understand that you probably have better things to do, like watch paint dry. So, but of course, we're going to talk about the budget next. You may be interested in that. So with that, I'll go to the Finance Committee for September 26th. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you. The Finance Committee full council meeting of the City of Willmar began at 5:15 on Thursday, September 26th at the City Office Building. And those present were committee members, Councilmember Nelson, Plowman, Fagerly, Osmus. Also present was Councilmember Alvarado, Vicki Davis, Sean Meskey, Finance Director Okens, and City Administrator Brian Gromitz. We had no public comments, and we received information from the City Administrator and our Finance Director regarding the mayor's proposed 2020 budget. And I will read the minutes from that includes the review that was done by them. The general operating budget includes approximately $17.5 million in revenues plus $1.7 million from fund balance reserves. These reserves are mostly comprised of excess from 2018 of $840,000 plus $870,000 resulting from previous council action to abandon the early retirement program. Proposed expenditures for the general fund were $19.2 million, of which $1.7 is for capital transfers out of operating. Proposed new revenue is a gas franchise fee of $245,000. It should be noted that there is a specific process required in order to institute a gas franchise fee. Further information will be provided at a future meeting as to what the approximate cost may be per customer. Future meetings will also open discussion about spending reserve dollars. Information on tax levies in comparable communities will also be provided at a future date. Staff is waiting for updated information from the League of Minnesota Cities, as the most recent information they have available is currently 2 years old, and it was also noted we have already received that information. And if someone wants that, we can certainly get that. Licenses permit revenue is proposed to increase $100,000 for previous year's budget to reflect a more accurate estimate of $566,000. Various governmental aids revenues were discussed. Fines, forfeits, earnings, revenue reflect a slight decrease based on historical trends. Miscellaneous revenue, which includes interest earnings, has a proposed increase based on the assumption that interest rates will rise. Other financing sources is primarily the intergovernmental transfer from the Willmar Municipal Utilities. It was noted that the transfers from the hospital are now located in miscellaneous revenue as the hospital is no longer a governmental entity. Under park and recreation revenues, gun range revenue is approximately $4,500, and the Warhawks and curling leases are broken out into different line items. Under general fund expenditures, the city administrator department is proposing an increase of $159,000 for possible professional services for assistant city administrator to fund the ebb and flow of projects, mostly regarding the local option sales tax. Most communities the size of Willmar typically have an assistant city administrator. Future meetings will continue discussion on this topic. Further discussion will also include salary ranges as well. There is a substantial increase in the election expenditures due to 2020 being an election year as well as a census year. The finance department is increasing due to a proposed added position. General government non-departmental is reflecting a substantial increase to accommodate personnel issues being addressed and anticipated health insurance increases. Anticipated health insurance rate increases have been reduced from 34.5% to 32.5% in 2020. Further discussion will be held at future meetings on the non-departmental amounts. Overall, new positions, including an additional accounting clerk position, an assistant fire chief position, and 2 interns, 1 for human resource department and 1 for planning and development services department. Other funds briefly discussed were the special revenue funds, debt service funds, and capital project funds. A handout was provided regarding the proposed tax levy, which is proposed in the amount of $5.7 million, which is approximately a 2.6% increase. The established impact on sample home values included a $140,000 home, $11.58 increase based on the city portion of the 2019 taxes. A $176,000 home, $15.45 based on the city taxes. A $344,000 home, a $33 increase based on the city portion of the 2019 taxes. We had a lengthy discussion, and after that discussion, the preliminary tax levy needs to be certified to the county auditor by September 30th, which is today. This amount may be reduced, but cannot be increased by the needs to be done by December 2nd, 2019 meeting. The mayor is proposing a 2.6% increase on the current levy to raise the total dollar amount to $5,776,821 in 2020. Concerns were raised regarding the combination of increasing the tax levy and instituting a gas franchise fee. After a lengthy discussion, it was moved to recommend that the preliminary levy be set at $5,924,657. And I will enter that motion now.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Discussion. Councilor Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to circle back around to this, the discussion that we had at the Finance Committee last week. And this specific dollar amount, as you all may notice, it differs from the dollar amount that was originally in the paperwork. And I would like to double check with our finance director and whatnot, and maybe our interim administrator as to this particular dollar value, what percentage it reflects and kind of how we got there and what the rationale was behind that.
Who do you want to call on first?
Finance Director Okins, please.
Finance Director Okins?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, some of the discussion at the meeting was in regards to the CenterPoint Energy proposed franchise and what it would take to possibly replace that or reduce it. And at one point in time, there was discussion about doubling the 2.6%. And then later in the discussion, there was talk about a percentage of 4.2%. The numbers that you have before you of $5.9 million is actually doubling that 2.6 or 5.2%. There was some confusion, and I did double check with Councilman Plowman in that and verified the number. That was the number that was discussed, the dollar amount discussed at the meeting. And so with that discrepancy, was directed to use that dollar amount rather than the percentage of 4.2 versus 5.2.
Thank you, Mr. Okins. And just to kind of give a brief explanation of where that came from, now there was some quick math that was taking place, but I guess there was no special magic to it or anything like that. The thought was that whatever recommendation regarding the levy was to come forward from that meeting, we were trying to keep under consideration that the levy may be brought down, but it may not be increased. So with that rationale, the thought was that if discussion were to come to the table tonight and it were to be decided by the council that we would remove or not institute or go the direction of the gas franchise fee, we wanted at that time to be sure that there were sufficient funds to cover items already noted in the budget, should those items all remain the same. But as noted, the dollar amount is not on the exact percentage that we had discussed to replace that franchise fee. And I think that probably was due to the quick math that was trying to be done, but we did have to go ahead and honor, and Mr. Okins did call me to have a discussion about that motion, and we did both agree that it would be best to go based on the audio and on the specific dollar value that was supplied for the motion, which was $5,924,657. And so that's how we got where we are. Okay, and if we could have further comments from our interim administrator, it would be welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Gramitz?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I think there was a lot of discussion about philosophy of taxing, as a fee, a tax, a charge. The public sees it all come out of their own wallet. So what exactly is it as far as they're concerned? It's just an increase. Okay, they don't care if it's a tax, a fee, or a charge. So there was some philosophical discussions about a regressive and progressive taxing policy, how the implementation of a franchise fee impacts, let's say, renters versus property owners, versus commercial, and how does property taxes, an increase in property tax, how does that affect renters and property owners and commercial? And so it was a combination of all of those, I think, things that people think about when they decide what's the proper portion of fees, charges, taxes that you would put together in a budget. And so I think it was a very good discussion. It'll probably continue to talk about what the implications of raising money from this source versus the other source. So in the end, I think the decision to increase the amount from the mayor's proposed budget really gives flexibility to continue that discussion, and then at the end decide, is a franchise fee the right thing, or should we not do it? And having this amount in the preliminary levy allows us to have that discussion when we get further down the road, obviously before December 2nd. But by no means does it tie you into levying that tax. It's an amount that we cannot exceed, but as we ask questions and get them answered and make decisions, you can always lower it as you see fit. So it was, I thought it was a very good discussion about all the things that go into, taxation and what it, or how it impacts the community residents. So with that, I think we just took the position that it gave us flexibility to increase this amount so that these questions still had an opportunity to be discussed and answered and finalized. And then December 2nd, we'll decide what the actual levy will be. So again, I thought it was a very good discussion, and we can always, we got plenty of time between now and December to work through the issues that were raised in that Finance Committee meeting. So.
Additional discussion, Councilmember Fuentes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the minutes you referenced that there's a specific process that needs to be gone through to institute a gas franchise fee. Not having been at the meeting, was there conversation about what that process is? And then when will we be having that come to the council to talk about a possible gas franchise fee, knowing that that needs to be, if that's what we're looking at tonight, is increasing it to offset that in the event it doesn't pass, when will we be discussing it?
Mr. Gramitz.
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, in answer to that question, the original timeline in talking about the gas franchise fee goes back to August 24 of 2015. So this isn't anything necessarily new. It's been talked about before. It just was not pursued. The city would have to create an ordinance. So the process, you have to build that timeline into the process. And Centerpoint had at the time submitted us a format that you fill in the blanks, and so it's not like we're reinventing the wheel. This shouldn't take that long. I did ask Mr. Okins to recontact Centerpoint. 4 years is a period of time, so maybe we want to recontact them and talk to them about if there's anything changed, if they have any other concerns or comments they want to forward to us. But I think between now and the end of the year, if the city council wanted to pursue this, there would be enough time to make that happen.
Additional comments or questions? I have a question. So the gas franchise fee was projected to bring in about $245,000, and the amount, the way I'm doing the math, I don't know, it's probably wrong, but it is a difference of $147,836, which leaves a shortfall of $97,164. Is that consistent with other people's math? Okay, Councilmember Nelson.
We did acknowledge that during the meeting, and I think we're aware of that and felt that that still got us closer to being able to review the expenditures and to review the income. With that, this kept the door open for us to look at options with that. And I think there certainly was not an intent that we're going one direction or another. We felt that this gave us the options to be able to look at the budget and to understand what the expenses were, and if there are places that can be made cuts, or if we're staying with the levy, and whether we want to pursue the franchise fee. So I think we did have a discussion about the franchise fee. The council did review that and voted it down, I believe, or voted not to do that in 2015 when that information was available. And so I think that's part of where we talked about the philosophy of do you look at fees or taxes? And so just felt that this kept the door open for us to be able to have that discussion.
So did anybody do the math on what the percentage of increase is?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this would put the increase at 5.2%, as I mentioned earlier, which would, as your proposed budget had a 1 mil increase, this would make it a 2 mil increase at what was the motion at the committee meeting.
I'm not following that. Does that make sense to you? Did you follow that?
And so then where does that put us in comparison with other regional centers? Councilmember Nelson had stated that we now have that information. Is that available to us?
No, we don't have the information available.
I thought you said later, I thought you said it is available now.
No, the minutes reflect that the League of Minnesota Cities does not have that information available. What we have is 2 years old, and we have already received the 2-year-old information.
Right.
Because the question was asked, do we want to look at where we were at 2 years ago, or do we want to try to get the current information as we work forward to make our decision?
Okay, that's what we did when we put the budget together, is we looked at, yeah, okay. Additional questions? Are you ready to vote then? Roll call.
Councilmember Fagerly,
No.
Maskey. Schwantes,
No.
Davis,
Aye.
Alvarado,
Aye.
Osmus. Aye. Plowman,
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
6 ayes, 2 nays.
Does that pass?
I believe it would, yeah. I don't know that I know the answer to that. Do we
What
have
does it
any
take to
special
pass
rules
the,
on?
pass the levy?
Mr. Mayor, this is a simple resolution which takes a simple majority.
Oh, I didn't think it did. Okay. It does pass. The motion does pass. Anything else come before the order? I'll take a motion to
Can I
adjourn.
finish
Oh, I'm
the
sorry,
minutes? Okay, so I just want to bring to your attention that there,
And for minutes, so.
okay, that there, the documents that you received, the conversations that took place and the request for additional information on the budget, our city administrator, I think between Mr. Okins and Mr. Gromitz, they put together this list, and I would just ask that you review that. We kind of walked through and numbered things that we're going to come back to and discuss more, and so I'd just like to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to request additional information. And I know several of you already have, and forwarding it to staff so that they have time to respond to that. And we will be discussing it at our Finance Committee meeting coming up next week, no, week after, with that, and then scheduling some special meetings too, so. And there was no other business to come before the committee, and we adjourned at 7:39. And I will enter a motion to accept the minutes now.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Adjourned.
We lied.
Well, the committee, they should let the council.
Mayor Calvin.
Here.
Councilmember Fagerly.
Here.
Maskey. Schwantes.
Here.
Davis.
Here.
Alvarado.
Here.
Osmus. Here. Plowman.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Okay, we have 3 items on the agenda for tonight. We wanted to have a conversation in regards to City Hall and the Community Center. And just an update, I know that there was a group that had last week went and visited a few different City Hall, Community Center buildings, and just wanted to make sure that the council is all on the same page of where we're headed with this. There have been some comments in the community that We're not discussing it as a whole council. People are expressing concerns about that. And so just wanted to bring it to the council and see if there's any questions that can be answered to try to get everybody on the same page. So, Brian, I don't know if you have anything you want to add?
No, I think I did anticipate some questions, so Mr. Okins and I prepared some information that has been handed out to the city council in prior years, and I think just kind of bringing it together, so if people had any questions, they could maybe I can remind themselves of what has happened before us. So I think what I'll do is I'll just hand out the materials that I've put together here, just so everybody can remind themselves of things that they've done, because I wasn't here, so this is just, it helps me by going through this information, and I thought, well, if nothing else, it may also help city council to, because this discussion has gone on for many, many years, and it's kind of like, where do we go from here? Well, what I've got is the Engen and Associates prepared a building footprint, if you want to call it, how much space was necessary. And then the other item has to do with how are we going to pay for it? And that's the part that I've been more interested in, because I think the architect will take care of, how much space, we need to have for all our offices. But the questions are going to come down to, where's the money coming from? So let me hand this out and then we'll go from. The first one is the Engen report that went through office by office, measured up how much space needed, what was unique about every particular one. Was it too small currently? It needed to be an extra 50 feet for storage of filing cabinets or whatever. The bottom line is you get to the back page and it's 22,000 versus 23,000. And one can say, well, that doesn't, 1,000 extra feet. It doesn't mean, to me, like we've changed drastically. But I think what's interesting to point out is that designed properly with good traffic flow, you can do with less space. I think one of the things you'll see on the sheet I think there's 3,000 feet or something like that or was it 1,000 feet? I can't remember. But, there's a city council room, So that's something that, we don't have at the existing city hall. But yet, if you design everything so it functions properly, you can have a smaller footprint. So, how that 20,000 square foot lays out or 22,000, that's yet to be determined. But I guess what I wanted to point out was there has been some analysis as to how much space is needed. And so this is just a reminder that this was performed a year or so ago to, I think, kind of start the discussion. And that was probably utilized for the other locations that you might have looked at. The second option is the financing options, and as that's getting passed about, that again is those financing tools that are available to the city to pay for a new city hall. And, nobody's waving a magic wand and all of a sudden the city hall appears and, debt-free. So we've got, I think the options that Mr. Okins and I had talked about was going from paying cash for it. It's an option. It may not be a palatable option, but the city has the money, and that decision would have ramifications on how we do street work, into the future. How do we pay for that? Or do you, bond for it? And in which chapter do you use to pay for that? And something that's been really popular in in communities that are strapped for cash is like a lease purchase, where, you know, we have somebody build the building, they lease it back to us, and after 10 years or 15 years, we purchase it for X dollars, and then we own it. So, I mean, there's an array of funding mechanisms, and that's what the second sheet really was set to kind of describe, and to give you an idea of what the pros and cons might be. You know, Mr. Okins might be more than capable of answering any questions. The decision to use some of your own money and bond for the rest, I mean, those are all just mixtures of the basic ways of financing that are available to the city. So, and that's a policy decision, you know, for the city council to make. But I think we have enough understanding of those methods that, you know, Mr. Okins can explain those to your satisfaction. And so it's just, you know, to me, you know, when they said we want to build a new city hall, I went, where? Okay, so now we've kind of focused on where, and, you know, kind of focusing on, you know, what it might look like by heading in the direction of, you know, construction manager, you know, here in the near future when we get to that point. But then once it's constructed, how are we paying for it? So to know all those questions up front, sometimes you need to know them a little sooner than others, because we need to know how we're going to fund it before we get the architect. I mean, it's a fundamental thing. You don't want to be bidding the thing out and still wondering, how are we going to do this? So we're going to walk through that, and that's what I think that was part of the discussion. I think that the mayor said, let's, you know, because it looks like we're serious about, you know, community center, city hall combination at that location. Now let's start that dialogue to talk about financing and, you know, design that comes later, you know, cooperative things that's going to come later. But right now it's like, if you're serious, how do we want to proceed? And then that, as I stated, has implications on 2021, how we do our street. Maybe we don't, you know, take from our own reserves and pay for it. Well, then what our next options are. So we'll work those through, and like I say, Mr. Okins and I can help as best we can and answer your questions. There may be some things that we need just to say, we need to talk to Ehlers, we need to talk to bond attorneys, we need to talk to some other people. Because you can be as innovative as you want to, you know, and do some things that are out of the mainstream on the financing side. You can at least ask the question, is it possible to do that? I don't know that we have that answer, that we can say yes without a doubt. The basics we can. You know, you want to borrow money, you want to sell bonds, you have to do a referendum to do that. Or if you use a different chapter of the state statutes, you may not have to do that. And if you do lease purchase, you don't have to do a referendum. And if you use cash in your own pocket, you don't have to do a referendum. So it's just really what does the city council want to do? And this is kind of what I call the beginning. Because as soon as we figure out what makes sense for the city of Willmar to pay for this, then we can enter into contracts to design it and then build it. And we have everything going down the right train track there. Okay?
Perfect. So the document in front of you, you'll notice that City Hall is listed at 2 million. The communities, this one here, the financing. The administrator kind of said we should talk financing first. If we can talk about whichever one you guys want as a council.
That's fine.
It's up to you. Which would you prefer to talk about first?
Go ahead.
Okay, the document in regards to the financing, that was when we were looking at the Hardware Hank building and purchasing that, and then just doing a renovation. So that's why you see that number considerably smaller. And I believe that's correct, right, Mr. Okins?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
I saw this back in 2017, so I'm gonna kind of dust off some of the cobwebs. So, and then the community center auditorium, that's where Councilmember Alvarado had wanted to make sure that we did the auditorium right. Councilmember Meske wanted to make sure that when we were going to do the auditorium, if we're going to do improvements there, that we didn't do it on the cheap, that we did it right. I believe that was a conversation that was had. Then the ice plant, that was when we were looking at the ice out at the, which we have done another funding source for that, as you would recall. And then stormwater, we'd added that in there too, because we were trying to add additional stormwater improvements at that time as well. The council had talked about that at their retreat. And so that's the reason for the 13.3 million here. So these are just numbers, and the numbers can go wherever we need them to go. I think the number that I placed in the budget that probably hasn't been talked about in depth was the 8.5 million. And then there's the additional 2 million from the local option sales tax. And so, again, like I stated when I presented the budget, there are no funding costs in the 2020 budget because the first year we put the budget together, there are no funding costs. So that money, as our administrator told us, those numbers would start in 2021, would be the first debt service that would be required. So if we want to have a conversation in regards to how we would actually do the funding piece of it, we can certainly have that, although I think that will be something that, probably should really, I think we can get a global direction, but I really think that that's the responsibility of the Finance Committee to come back with a recommendation on how they would recommend to the council for funding that with the committee structure we have set up. So with that, I'd take any questions, and I know Mr. Okins and Mr. Gramitz are prepared for that, so. Councilmember Alvarado, followed by Plowman.
Okay. Is there like different steps? Like if we say we're going to build a city hall for let's say 4 million, would you have a different plan versus 8.5 million? You know what I mean? Would you use the same procedure at one level versus a higher level? Would you make the same recommendation?
So I think your question is the funding mechanism change based on the dollar amount? Is that what you're asking?
I think so, correct.
Mr. Gramitz?
I would say yes. It is part of the decision-making process because you could sit there and say, as I said before, if you have cash on hand, you don't have to bond at all, if that's the decision you want to take. So if you wanted to say, we're going to pay for half of it, and we're going to bond for half of it, that may make a determination that one way of financing it is better than the other. Obviously, if we're going to pay for half of it up front, then the lease purchase doesn't really fly because, well, it could. Let's say we were going to take $2 million of reserves and put it with the community center, $2 million, and say, that's a done deal. Now we're only lease purchasing the city hall. I mean, so this can be as complicated and divvied up into little sections as much as you want to, but the short answer is how you do it does make a difference. It's going to make a difference on interest rate. It's going to make a difference on tax levy. If you use your own money, you end up doing bonding for your street projects. Let's say you use all $8.5 million and you're just going to pay for it upfront, no debt on City Hall, but that wiped out your reserves that you use for your street projects. Now, as we get further into it, Mr. Okins will sit there and say, if you've got, let's say, $8.5 million in the is it community investment? Mm-hmm. Let's say you have $8.5 million in there. You're getting about $160,000 in interest every year. Now, $160,000 is a lot of money, but it doesn't come close to paying for a lot of street work. So you could say it's better to borrow now because we're not getting much on our interest. And as the county just sent today, they're at 1.5 to 2.1 on their interest that they're paying.
1.4.
So this is a really good time to go into debt. One would hate to say anybody wants to go into debt, but this is as good a time as any because the interest is so low 2 years from now, it could be 4%, could be 5%, who knows? But when you're down into 1.5s, it's almost like borrow the money, keep your cash on hand, because it's that good of a deal. So how much you want to spend and where you want to take it, like I say, these are all variables that, yes. How much you're going to, if you're going to spend 4 million versus 8.5, that would change how I would look at things.
Thank you.
Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was kind of going to be my question revolving around current interest rates, bonding, and kind of which direction that's headed. But I think our interim administrator answered that quite well. I guess also in that answer sort of answered the previous question then, if the total cost of the project is going to dictate our funding mechanism, then it would make sense to me to determine what our total cost is going to be first and then determine our funding mechanism, as opposed to the other way around.
Councilmember Miskey.
All these are moving numbers. I mean, I get that. First clarification, when you said that there's 8.5 in the budget, does that include the 2 million in the local option sales tax?
No.
So you're saying a $10.5 million project? And I know that.
I think I'm being on the high end of it.
Right,
because
well, that was going to be my next point, is that I think we're looking at a $20,000 building, and there can be a range of what you do in there and get a different number per square foot. But if we assume that that is the worst case scenario, that also would be helpful to know which way we're going to plan for this as well. And then if we go, and I don't think it's going to be that radically different that we would go with a different funding mechanism necessarily, but I just want to know, we're looking at a goalpost at a maximum in your mind at the 10.5.
Conversation you and I had earlier is that I didn't want to go over 4.5.
Right.
I preferred to be closer to 4 on the city hall project. That was a conversation you and I had at one of the city hall meetings.
Exactly.
And so I felt that because we're another year down the road from that, I felt that I needed to add a little bit. And then I also felt that it might be another year before we actually had that construction documents. And I shouldn't say another year, but we won't be in the ground, if you will.
Okay.
And so I wanted to have a little bit of extra room there. I've heard regularly from many council members that they want it to be a nice building, that we don't just want, I think one of the things I heard was we don't want a steel building. And I think we're all in agreement of that. And so we want to have the flexibility. My goal is that we would come in as close to or as reasonable as we can, and by putting the two buildings together, we'd be able to do some of that. I don't know if we'll be able to accomplish that or not. Councilmember Schwantes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our tour that we took on Friday certainly shed some light on the project of the City Hall. We learned a lot, but one of the impactful things for me was the last building that we viewed. It was a community of, I think, like 5,400 people. They had about 14 employees, and their building cost $4.9 million. And it was, that was a city hall, and their community center was simply one meeting room and a kitchen. And so that really puts those dollars into perspective when you realize that a nice building, but 4.9 million doesn't go very far. Not as far as I was expecting anyway.
Which probably goes to what Councilmember Plowman said of we maybe need to look at the size of the building first. I mean, I think the numbers that I was using, I think was $230 a square foot, I think. I don't know if that math works out or not. But Councilmember Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to direct this to Mr. Okins. When you speak to our bond people, what are they saying about the trends for insurance rates, borrowing money right now? Have they indicated where they think interest rates are going to be 5, 6, 8 months down the road?
Well, they have been kind of bouncing around presently. As you know, the Fed fund rates for borrowing have been decreased here recently. There's discussion about them possibly going down again. But in year 2020, it's an election year, so that is an uncertainty that the market is kind of uncertain on. And all indications are if rates aren't going to go any lower, that they are going to possibly next year go on the rise to some degree. Europe has a negative borrowing rate actually right now, so it's stable right now, but any kind of discussion with the trade with China or the election next year have impacts on what they could do. And I mean, indications are that they're thinking they're going to go up at some point in time here in the next 6 months.
Eventually, somebody will be right. They will go up if you say it long enough. Correct. So that being said, then would it be? How long does it take? Let's say we decide on a footprint and a size. How long does it take to then lock in a bond or something like that? Or it depends on the bond, or is there a?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, yes, the type of financing you do is naturally going to determine the length of time. If you go with a referendum requirement or those types of financing, it's going to take longer than if you use cash, if you got cash on hand. So the type of financing you use and the options that are available to you would determine the length of that.
What I'm getting at is I like Mr. Grammons's idea that right now rates are down. This might be an opportunity, if we're going to borrow money, it might be an opportunity to borrow at a lower rate, as opposed to using up our cash and that sort of thing. It's just my thought, something to think about, and I just don't want to miss the opportunity. It's like if you're buying a house. When do you want to buy the house? When do you want to borrow money? When the interest rates are down, and that's what people are doing, is buying houses, interest rates are down. So I think it would be prudent to maybe look at that potential. That's just me speaking. Thank you.
Other comments? Councilmember Fagerly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we have to decide what's going to be in there first. I mean, we have a tenant, mid-Minnesota. Are they going to continue to rent? And if they do, where are we putting them? We also have building downtown Rack 8. Are we moving them out there to cut costs on custodial and utilities? And we got the Convention and Visitors Bureau. They might want to come there too, so we got to see how much space we need first.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what Andrew was saying. Mr. Grammons.
Just a preliminary review of commercial office space, just a national kind of average. New York is obviously going to be higher than Dubuque, Iowa, kind of a thing, or Willmar, Minnesota. $200 that's fixed up. $150 for the shell, usually with like a $50 allowance for the tenant to finish off the insides. And so if you look at our numbers at 8.5, if you just said that's City Hall, that's $370 a square foot. So that's probably well above the average for quality. But if you're sitting down there at 4.5 million, then you're right on that $200 a square foot. So that gives you, I guess, some sense of certainty that you're not, if you're looking at 4.5, you're right, basically at the average of what it costs for a commercial office building. But as stated earlier, sometimes 4.5 doesn't go very far.
Right. So the $8.5 million is for City Hall and the community center combined. So is what I had in the budget. So That's where that's at. Councilmember Sean.
Well, I'm looking at the Engen piece, and maybe someone can help me. I hate to switch documents, but,
Well, I think we should switch documents, yeah.
because as we're talking about sizes, I mean, I'm looking at, I've got a first floor existing proposed, I've got second floor existing, not so much proposed there, but same with basement floor, nothing really proposed, but if you go to the last page, it does tell you what the planned square footage would be on those levels. And so some of the questions people are starting to ask have been taken into account. I don't think the architect or that's putting out these initial numbers knew where we were going yet, but I think there is plenty of space that is not documented here because it's going to depend on what we want to put in the thing. But I think that 20,000 is going to cover at least what I'm looking at for the needs of what we need. I think that is a fairly safe number. That was the number that the committee has looked at to have architects put what that would look like or designers put out what that might look like on that footprint. So I mean, they didn't make any accounting of some of those things that people are asking about now, whether there'll be tenants there or so on. But the square footage is there. It just has not been earmarked for those things because we've got to make up our decisions on that. So, you know, as I look at this, I'm thinking, well, you've put in, if we're going with the 10.5, that's 425 square feet. If you say 8.5 is 370. I think whatever that range may be, but I think to 20,000 seems to be a reasonable number until we can start putting some real values in here. It's a good placeholder, I think, for conversation.
Yeah, I think if you take a look on page 11, in the third yellow,
Yep.
and then up 2 spots, there's a tenant space there of 3,083. So I think that's the mid-Minnesota. And as the council will remember, we did do an agreement with them to extend that. But I think there is an out in that agreement as well, is what I was told. So, Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Nelson first.
I just had some questions about this document that Ingen did. This is the first I've seen it. I don't know if it's first that everybody's seen it, but I'm just wondering if there was staff input into this or how this document was done. And is this a document that the task force has been using? Or, you know, because I guess I have a question. If we're going to rent, are we going to create renter space for the benefit of income? Or should we be renting? I mean, I don't know that one fundamentally, and I believe I've been told that we can get out of the lease and with that. And so I just have questions about this document, and is this a document we can work from with that? And are we just duplicating what we have now, or are we being creative with the space as we went to look in different places? So
So the document was created by a former city administrator working with staff and Ingen, and they met with each of the staff members. And this had been shared with the committee before, or with the task force in the past. I don't recall, this says March 6th of 18. I don't recall when this was shared with the task force. You remember, Kathy?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it was included in the booklet that we all got, a binder that had a lot of information, the whole history of City Hall efforts.
Yeah, Mr. Gramitz has the booklet over, that's the one.
That one there, yeah. That's where I found this. I was looking all over City Hall asking, has anybody done anything? And they said, oh, yeah. Ingen came through and they measured up the rooms and they said how much more space you need. And, you know, so there's been, I think, a good platform to sit there and say, at the present time, we have 20,000 square or 21,000 square feet or whatever it is. And quite honestly, what if you're just going to duplicate it, you need more because they've got a city council room. It went from 1,400 to 2,800 square feet kind of a thing. So when you add it all up, the reason it doesn't get any bigger is because they took out the basement rental. That was 3,000 feet gone, and they added 4,000 feet on in the end result. So anyway, I wasn't here when this was put together, but it was measured up. I think all the tenants in each room at City Hall, or the positions, were asked, how much space do you really need? Where's your storage? Et cetera, and they came up with some basic figures. Now, I'm going to say, as knowing, architects, they can design some unique designs that are really efficient and effective and multi-use space that serves two purpose. So do you actually need 23,000 square feet? I don't know. That's the question for the architect at some point in time. Okay.
Good with that? Councilman Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry, I got to jump back to whole dollars and budgetary figures just to make sure that we are all on the same page, or maybe it's just myself that's not. Okay, we're talking 8.5 mil for City Hall.
Combined both.
Okay, so we're talking $2 million local option sales tax towards the community center. And then we were talking a City Hall and then whatever excess the community center needs in order to combine with City Hall for a grand total of 10.5, or not to exceed 10.5.
That's the numbers I threw out there. I'm not saying that that's where the council needs to settle. I'm
Well,
just
that's okay.
Yeah, right.
Got it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Additional comments or questions? So maybe somebody that was on the tour, I don't even know who all went on the tour. I'd seen the emails, but I know Councilmember Osmus, you had done a tour previously with the task force as well, so. Can somebody make some comment? Councilmember Osmus.
Okay, just some comments when we are talking about the square footage. Obviously, we're talking about just the 20,000 for the City Hall. You still have to factor in then what's going to be the square footage for the community center. And I think the ones we looked at that had the combinations, there's going to be, I think, a perfect opportunity to share space with the audience portion of where the City Hall chambers would be, and then that used for a community gathering area as part of the community center. And we had discussed about where the chamber desks are, the city council chamber desks. That would be a portion that could be closed off. So all the technology and the stuff behind that wouldn't be accessible to the public. There was, we had one really good layout as far as like how engineering, if we get their plans of exactly what their square footage was for that area, that was ideal of how their offices were set up. The other thing is, as I was looking through this document that Ingen did, there's different sizes for all the different offices. One of the facilities that we toured had the exact same size for everybody, and I liked that, but then a little bit larger for the city administrator. But then they had more conference rooms. And so if you had to meet with people, it was outside of your office space. And the one that I really liked had 3 conference rooms. And there was one that was first for entrance for the public, so that there would be an entrance from the front lobby area that they could go in, and then also staff could enter from another door. There were several of them that had that kind of an arrangement. That was good. And then another conference room that would just be for a staff entrance in the staff area. And then they had one that was, I call it a working conference room. So if you had large projects that you were collating, or large projects that had to get laid out on tables, it was a big working space of about 4 tables that were together to be able to have for that space. And like elections, and to be able to spread out all that information. Those were good.
Did we have any of the staff go with? I know, was it Sarah and Sean went?
Sean went, yeah.
Did you go, Brian?
I did not, no.
Okay. Anybody else have comments? Audrey, did you go? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Audrey?
So this was kind of my first exposure since I haven't participated with the task force, but for me, I think, and we had some questions when we were discussing about what is going to be in the community center, or what should the community center be with that. The city hall, I think, there were several different options, but it really comes back to the size of our staff versus, and I think how staff needs to function, the cubicles versus office versus having the meeting room space with some of that. But I did like several things that we saw in different locations, but I think it comes back to how we're going to use the community center. And I think in both the first two that we went to, not in Carver did not have any activities going on. They really had more senior center area. The one did not have a YMCA and so they had a real fitness area. But to me, I think that's a question with what do we want in the community center as it relates. And also, all of them had some nice outdoor space. Not a lot, but some space. So I didn't see the plans that were presented, but the question I had was a two-story building, certainly preserving as much outdoor space as we can in that location, and how direction you would face, and allowing staff to have some outdoor space too. So it certainly was worthwhile, and I think we also talked about perhaps we need to do it again as we get further down the road with just experiencing that. The cubicle, one place it was great, the other one it was not. The working space, I think, is important. And I would certainly hope that when we're looking at, and that's part of the reason I asked the question about the Ingen one, is that we aren't just duplicating what we have, because I think work processes have changed and those types of things, and with workstations, and to be able to create efficiencies for staff in how they function too. And so that was simply my observation with the day. So,
Fernando.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things we saw was there was a pre-2001 9/11, and then there was two post 9/11 examples of construction. The pre-9/11 was more open, had greater accesses, and that has become a concern because it's hard for them to monitor all those accesses. So it was good to see that versus the post 9/11, and how the access has been narrowed down and how they can monitor it and that sort of thing. So I think we're going to be looking at that. Off the kind of the DIAS conference area where the public would meet during the city council meetings, Audrey was correct where she described they had an open area to the outdoors. So if you were had a function and you want to entertain, there was a space outside that was done. It was really complemented the inside, I thought. So that was very well done. And that was done at a couple of places, and it was an add-on, an afterthought at one place, but it turned out to be a real advantage. But we got the advantage of knowing about it up front, so we can think about that. The one that we seemed to like had storage. They compensated for or thought about having storage for if you're going to have round tables. When you're done with the round tables, you've got a place to put them. They're not on the floor somewhere. There's a home for them and that sort of thing. And there were like a lot of common rooms used by the seniors and whomever and that sort of thing. So it was a kind of an eye-opener. There was a lot of pride. I think each presenter was proud of their building, and I got that feeling that they were real happy. The first one we went to, yes, they've had some growing pains. They're in a suburb that's growing and is having some success with growth. Things are tight, and hopefully that'll be our problem, and we plan accordingly. But the other one, a little more airy, a little more space to grow in yet, and so that was kind of cool. But we saw a lot of nice structures and a lot of pride in their structures, I think. Thank you.
Councilmember Metzger, or Sean, I mean.
I was just gonna say, because there was been a couple mentions about the plans that were presented at the task force before, and I want to point out that when those were presented, they were only to see conceptually if we could fit the properties on there. And there were some great ideas. They didn't go into those very far because they had no direction to do it. But in every one of those, every person and every company incorporated green spaces throughout. So I think that's the norm to do. I would cherry pick off a couple of them when we finally get down to it. But I was interested, Fernando, you mentioned, was that a discussion point pre and post 9/11 design, or did you come up with that?
Yeah, we, it was brought up in the discussion and we saw the difference. It was radically different. Like the first place, it was kind of a T design. You had an opening at the bottom of the T, and at either end of the T, it was opened. And they expressed, it was hard to monitor it. They shared the space with the National Guard. And they were suggesting putting in big flower pots or something at the entrances to, prevent anybody from charging through or driving through. And so, yeah, that was a real concern, like I said, a year before, a year difference.
I think they ended up having to retrofit their front lobby area, where before it would have been very open and the public could have accessed into the office area. So they had to put up walls and then to be able to have a pass card to be able to get back into those areas then, where before it was very open.
So we have do we have an idea then? We're going to probably try to find a hybrid between that, where we have an openness but still have security. Is that what we're heading towards, or you would recommend?
Yes, I would say, if you were just to think of like how ours is now, if we had a large waiting area out in front, have some tables or some chairs and a small table there for a waiting area, and then like we have our gate that goes down, now that's secure. Before that wasn't. They just walked in and they were up at Deb's desk. So just to have a secure area that somebody comes up to at the counter. And then that was another discussion point, was having a long counter, so that it is welcoming and different people could do, they had to fill out some kind of form for, let's say, a parade permit. They could still be off on one end of the counter, and somebody from the city office could still be dealing with somebody else on this end. But
Audrey and then Vicki.
I was going to comment too about the things that Julie was indicating, that they had to make changes or chose to make changes in dividers. But you did have a sense though of having a place to be or a place to go to. So even if you were filling out a form in the first place we were at, there was a table you could go sit at, those types of things. But there certainly was a presence that someone was there. The third place, when you walked in, there was no one. The City Hall was upstairs, and the downstairs was simply bathrooms, elevators, stairs, and the community room. But when you look at their size, and they recreated the current location, so they used it fits into the downtown of Carver, and it's brick, and it's those types of things. So it's a whole different situation than the type of City Hall that we would be talking about. But I certainly think we felt the updated technology, the updated, the state-of-the-art kinds of things that would help our employees to be able to work differently.
Vicki.
So thinking about the first place we saw, and they were kind of bursting at the seams. They were packed in there, and it was kind of messy. And thinking about how, we're wondering if we should rent spaces out or not. And so what if we start by renting office spaces and then move into them as we need to?
So build for the future, not for today.
Yeah.
Additional comments? Fernando.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. They were very open about types of floor coverings, ideas on that. I mean, they were pretty specific on a lot of things, and I think we wrote down some notes, and we got those in some minutes. So we have some it wasn't just general, it got down to detail and things that we should think about as we design the building or ask for our architects to do things. Don't do this, do this, and we have some good concrete ideas. So I think that's kind of good to know too. And I also liked a couple of places, like it was, I'm going to say the senior center. It was right
Community
off.
center?
Community center was right off the entrance almost to the city offices. There wasn't that much space. It was real good flow, I thought. So if somebody wanted to go right to the office, they could just flow right in there. It was that close. They weren't a mile down the road. They were real close to the entrance to the city offices. I thought that was kind of a nice thing too.
Okay, well, it sounds like we've got some direction. And the task force will continue to meet. We heard a couple times tonight that those conceptual drawings, that maybe the entire council should see those. That might be something, Brian, if we can get those out to the entire council, so that everybody can see those. I know that was covered on the video that Rudy was videotaping, but we maybe should just get those to everybody. And with the caveat that Sean mentioned is that these were just ideas. How could it fit on the space, the 5 point whatever acres? And so there was nothing, they were given no direction as to, we want it to be a 2-story, we want it to have X number of parking spaces, we want X amount of green space. That will all come, that's what the council will decide coming down, working with the architect. That those are the decisions we have yet to make. And so are we good on the conversation on City Hall, or do we want to have more conversation? Or I think we should get those drawings so that everybody can see them. Just understand that we're not headed a particular direction. So, Councilman Audrey.
If the task force is going to continue as they've met, just would have a request to bring the rest of the council along with the, as we go, and also the community. Are we going to get some community input in some of the steps with that? And that's just a question for me, so.
I think that we will be, I don't see us having additional, and the other council members chip in here, but I don't see us having additional public input sessions. We've had those already. The public is invited to all of our meetings, as always. But I'm certainly willing to say whatever anybody wants to do here. But again, and I've said this many times, we were elected to make decisions, and we need to make those decisions. I'm not saying block out the public. I'm just saying that we're elected to make those decisions. Julie.
Thank you. I would agree on the city hall that I don't know that we need any more community input. To me, that's going to be up to the employees and the space that they need to function and to do their job, to serve the public. But I do think that for the community center, we do need some input, and I have promised that there would be community input and that the people would be able to have their say about what they would like to see in it.
Yes, I was talking specifically for City Hall.
Thank you.
Kathy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just note that all of our meetings have been recorded. This last tour was a voice recording rather than an audio recording, or excuse me, a video recording. But any council members or any members of the public that would like to be able to see what that conversation has been, it is out there and available. And then the minutes have also been coming through in the council packets.
Audrey.
I do feel a sense, though we are building a building that's going to be used in this community for 30 to 50 years. I think bringing the public along, even just the concepts of it, helps to do that. And the fact that it is combined with the community center does put more community in the building. And so I think there is a way to share the information with the community. We're 9 people sitting at the table here, and we were elected by the community, and I do think there are some things that would be helpful for them to understand and to help have some input in it too, so.
Sean?
Just echoing, and I think there are going to be some, I don't want this to be a dichotomous thing where there's this community center over here and a city hall over here, and some of the times it's easy to do that because we just replicate what we have. I think this is an opportunity to say, we got some places where this can meld together, and so we got to work with a little synergy between our city group, city council group, as well as the local option sales group, and to cast that net farther, especially as it pertains to the community center areas and some of those ideas of how shared areas might look. Because I don't like the idea, if we're putting these together for efficiencies, to just recreate them both closer together is probably not the idea. The concept was to put them together. And so hopefully we're going to get away from a little bit of that territorial, it's this and this. You know, I hear one of the examples just scared me as you were talking about, Councilmember Alvarado, is you come in and it's easy to go this direction for the city hall and this direction for the community center. Well, when I come in, and I'm going to hearken back to our new folks that are working on our staff who say it should be like you come into your living room. That means there's a merger of some of those areas. And so I like that some of them, you're giving some examples where they are merging those. I hope we embrace that kind of a concept because I think that's what the council was moving towards. And so I agree that let's get information, but if we do them in isolation, I'm afraid we're going to keep going down the separate group, and I don't like that.
Fernando?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you misunderstood me. I didn't mean that. What I was trying to describe was the community center was here and it just flowed. If you wanted to get into the administration or city hall, it was just within feet.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to.
But it was a common area.
It was a common area. It was not separated by miles. It was a common flow. You could go either way quickly, easily.
And I was just playing back through my mind here, the things that we talked about tonight. One of the things that we didn't answer is what Rick had brought up of, are we going to bring Rack 8 and some of our other facilities into the same building? And I think that's yet to be decided, but I think that the intent is that we try to put as much under one roof as we can to try to build efficiencies. It's kind of part of the conversations, but none of that has been decided yet. So action steps that I see that we need, Brian, to make sure we get, hopefully by the end of the week, we can get those template drawings out to the rest of the council so everybody has them in their box by the end of the week. That'd be great. So they have those. And I don't know that there's a way we can upload those easily onto the tablets. They just won't copy well, I don't think was what a couple of them said. So, but again, those are just concepts. They were not given any direction. I think, Brian, you can probably say it better than I can, but I think what you said was, will it fit on this area? And if it fits, what could it look like? I think was the only direction you gave them.
Right. I gave them, I think it was 17,000 square foot for the community center and 20,000 square foot for City Hall, and said, does it fit on 5 acres, and it fits. And even they came up with 2-story buildings, like City Hall was 10 on 10 and 17 was one level for the community center. But there was discussion. I know there was discussion right after. It says, well, who gets the view of the lake? Those decisions
are coming.
It could be that the community center and City Hall gets a view of the lake. That's a design function. So we'll get there. But it was very simple. Does this type of facility fit on that acres with the parking needs of the community center and City Hall? And the answer was, yeah, it'll work.
And the nice thing that we had there is that 2 of them actually built in a walking, biking trail around the facility.
Correct.
One of them had a green space area, but two of them had specifically put a pond, a retention or detention pond, and then they had a walking trail around it, and then one of them actually had a connection to the trail system. So I thought that was very good. So additional comments before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, staff, you have the direction you need? Let's move. Okay. Next is an item I asked to be put on the agenda, and it's attendance at community events. In the past, the council has, in my opinion, this is the mayor's opinion, nobody else's, we really haven't represented ourselves as a collective body at community events. We'll have some people attend, and it's kind of, are you going to go? Are you going to go? I would like us to be more methodical in that process. And the first event that's coming up is coming up next month. I think it's the 10th, and it's the Willmar Area Community Foundation. And in the past, we have had council members attend that, Councilmember Osmus, Councilmember Nelson, myself, I think Councilmember Schwantes, Councilmember Davis, I think you and your husband attended last year as well. But I think that we should take a conscientious effort. You know, the Willmar Area Community Foundation gave us over $1 million for the playground. And then there's some additional dollars that staff is working on some additional projects out at the playground area. And, you know, when you get this type of an investment, I think that the least we can do as an elected body is to show up at these events. In the mail today, I received my invitation for the Rice Gala, and Councilmember Nelson serves on that. And so what I was wanted to talk about is that if a council member serves on a particular board, commission, that council member would then be the representative and kind of the lead on putting that team together of people that would attend. But that in the past, we've kind of done it where, you know, in the past, Audrey's called me and said, I'm going to go to X. Are you going to go? Yep, I'm going to go. Okay, I'll get the tickets. And then we call Janelle, and Janelle gets us the tickets. I think we should be more methodical in that we should get a table at these events. There are not that many of them that happen in our community. And, you know, I'm talking the Rice Gala, I'm talking about the Willmar Area Community Foundation. You know, we could talk, however we want to include these. I know that, I think you go to the Humane Society one as well. And so there are a number of them, but I want us to be more methodical in how we do it. So I had the city administrator check, is it legal for us to do this? And it is, as long as we just tell people that we're going to be there. And so we have 3 spots left for the Willmar Area Community Foundation, if people are interested in going to that one. But then the Rice Health Foundation, I know Councilmember Nelson would be going to that. The only stipulation is that the elected official gets to go, but if your spouse goes, your spouse has to pay, whatever. So whatever the going rate is for a ticket, you would have, your spouse would pay that to the city. And so I'm looking for some direction. Do you guys as a council agree with what I'm saying? Do you not agree with what I'm saying? Do you think there's a way we could do it better? I talked to Brian about this, and he goes, Marv, he says, why don't you talk about it at your retreat just to get the whole council to buy in on it? So what are some thoughts? I'm trying to, and the deal is, if there's more than 4 of us there, all we have to do is post it. The city attorney has already ruled. We just have to post it that there's an event and that the council will be there at the event. So
I think it's a great idea. I mean, even the city, you know, we have the utilities have their customer
sure.
appreciation gala thing. All of those things are good. I was always under the impression that once if I went there and I saw 4 of my colleagues, I turn around and I got to go. But if the fact is,
we were told that at one time.
Exactly. If we can post that, then we can all go. I think that's great. More of those things, the better.
Right. Okay, thank you. Audrey?
I guess just how we will find out notice about it. I know I get emails and some things, and I usually just look at them as an individual, or I may go to some things because I have been involved with them. But, so I'm just curious with, does the city get notified? Can they send it out to us, or do we forward the invitations we get to the city so that everybody knows about them with that? And because some of the things, there's a lot of things out there. I don't know that we can go as a group to all of them because they are expensive. But I know I do get questions with, nobody from the city council was at this event. And sometimes I choose to go individually and just pay for it. I don't, because I think it's the right thing to do. So I think we need a little more clarification, though, how many dollars are we willing to spend on that? Because the tickets are not inexpensive. So.
Well, and so Brian and I did talk about this, and so if you have an event that you would like to attend, then how we would do it is that you would get that to Janelle, and then Janelle, through the administrator's office, would send that out and see if there's other council members that are wishing to go. The two I talked to Brian about was the Rice Gala and the Willmar Community Foundation. Those are the two I talked to Brian about. Because I think that those, I mean, you sit on that board, and I mean, I think it really shows unity in a council if we are together. I mean, an event that Vicki and I were at recently, Vicki was sitting on one side and I was sitting on the other, and we didn't even know each other were there. And it would be better if we were together. And, we know we don't all think the same, and we don't all do everything the same, but at the end of the day, the community should see us as a unified team there. And when you go to an event, you're not talking business anyways. You're there for that event, whatever that event chooses to be. I don't think that the community would criticize us. As far as budget, did I put 5,000? Do you remember what I said to put in that? I thought it was 5,000.
Was it 50,000?
50,000. Is that a 5 in it?
I don't remember what it was.
So, but I mean,
It was 3 to 5, somewhere in there.
Yep. We don't have that many events. I don't think we'd be going to everything. I mean, some of us, Audrey, like you said, some of us are going to choose to go to something. I mean, you may choose to say, hey, I want to go to this one. No other council member wants to go. You buy one ticket. You know what I mean? We've done that for years. So, other comments?
Well, I think a lot of them are actually very inexpensive or free. But again, knowing that if we put it out there that we have permission to have more, we'd have a quorum there. With that obstacle out of the way, I think I will be more than happy when I hear about them to bring them forward. But it's then getting butts in the seats that's important after that.
Right, so we would not buy a table unless we thought we could fill the seats. I mean, if you wanted to go as an individual to one thing and you only have one council member or the mayor, I mean, I attend a fair number of events that other people probably don't attend. Well, most of them I'm at, Audrey's at too. But I mean, we attend a lot of the same things because, we're out there. And but I'd like to expand that to more people. So do I have a informal or a thumbs up? Okay. Next item on the agenda is the revised council action request form. Brian talked to me about this last week, and he has some ideas on what he'd like to see done differently to improve the flow of our meetings. Brian.
Mr. Mayor and city council members, this is not changing drastically by no means. But as I was watching these last few months how the city council operates, and I sometimes try and boil things down to its basic information and give it to the city council. So what I did here was something that I've done in my last two communities, and that is basically take the existing format, and you've got the first thing you see is at the top on the right-hand side, you got date, and below that is subject. And then you got the agenda item, consideration, which is what? The subject. And then you've got the introduction request, which if you go down to recommendation is basically the same thing again. So I'm just saying, let's, can we simplify this thing and only say things once? And then I changed the order just a little bit. If you notice and look at maybe the recommended format is just simply this, is that you got a recommended action. I had a mayor one time tell me basically, I read my stuff. What do you want me to do? That's the first thing I want to see. If I don't understand it, I'll have you explain it. So the first thing I always put was, what do I want the city council to do? My recommendation is to approve this or approve that. And I actually go one step farther than probably Willmar has in the past. Instead of just saying adopt a resolution in support of this, I'll say approve the resolution 6-23 to support I will literally put the motion in your hands. You don't have to follow it if you don't want to, but the recommendation would be very specific. Like in this case that I have here, and I chose this one because that's what Janelle gave to me. I said, pick one, pick one, and then I'll just modify it. And she happened to pick this one. So this is not, I'm not pushing for anything, but it's before you. You'll deal with it at a later date. But, motion by, second by to approve the updated purchase policy adopting state statute 471.345, uniform municipal contracting law by reference. Those words are not just there because they like being next to other words. That is the motion. So what I would suggest is, because I've seen it, various, not just Willmar, other cities, they'll look at the city attorney and they'll say, what's the motion? I always take one step and I try and get it as specific in front of you as possible. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the history. If you don't understand what's going on the recommended action, you go down to history, the past, the present, the future kind of a thing, the statistics, and then the financial impact. And some issue sheets I had legal impact, and I just hit all the buttons so that you have all the information you want to see before you. But understand the sequence of events is you do the motion, then you do the discussion, and then you call for the vote. And again, Willmar is not unlike other cities where they discuss the whole issue, then they get a motion, and then the mayor will say, any discussion? Well, you just had 20 minutes of discussion before somebody made a motion. So realistically, this is set up to follow the procedure. Somebody makes a motion to do something, then we do the discussion, then we do the vote. So it's sequentially on purpose. It's specifically worded on purpose. And again, it's a recommended action. The council says, no, we don't want to do that. We want to take a different tack. Then, by all means, change the motion. Not a problem. But I'm looking at it in how to make it seem logical. This is how we progress through each one of our topics or agenda items. So
Brian had brought this to me, and he asked, what I thought of it, and I really have no heartburn over it. I mean, it's whatever you as a council, and I can think of a couple times where we've kind of looked of, well, what are you asking us to do? I mean, I can think of that recently within the last couple months. What are you asking of us? What do you want us to do? And where this spells it out very clearly that this is what staff is asking for us to do. If we choose to do something different, that's the council's prerogative. But this is specifically what staff is requesting. And then, as he stated, the facts come, and then the other part that I liked about it is it's given the ramifications. So one of the things that I hear a lot as I sit here and preside over the meetings is, we had this amount budgeted, this is the amount that it is, how is it compared to the budgeted amount? And I mean, those have been getting better, but last year we were pretty bumpy on those. I mean, recently they've been a lot better. But again, all that information would be there. And then the committee chair would have this information prior to the meeting. So if something wasn't there, then they could go back and make sure that information was there. When I would prepare the agenda, when I'd review the agenda, I would make sure that all of those facts are there. Currently, when I review the agenda, I just look at what's on labor, I look at what's on finance, I look at what's on community development, I look at what's on Public Works, and I don't even look at the council action reports because I'm assuming that the council is taking care of those. So that's how I'm currently reviewing the documents, is just to make sure that the information is there to make decisions. So this is a way to streamline what we're doing, to make it clear what staff is asking of us so that there's no confusion. That's one of the things that when the lady that's putting together from Springstead for our city administrator, that's one of the things that staff said is that, we want to do what the council wants us to do, and the council wants staff to do what they want them to do, but sometimes that's confusing. And so this would clean that up. And I think it's a good recommendation of the administrator, but discussion. Councilman, Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I agree. I think the new layout has a better flow to it in terms of hierarchy of items. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think it would be more correct, and our interim administrator did allude to this, but I believe it would be more procedurally correct that for action items, motions, resolutions, whatnot, they must be motioned first before discussion can ensue. And we are all too often guilty of having lengthy discussion before a motion is ever even made, which is technically not correct. So if this would help to clean up that problem that, again, we've all jumped in and started discussion on items, then I'm all in favor of it, yeah.
Sean.
I think parliamentary procedure-wise, it's great. It follows a logical progression. I would even ask one other thing that even makes something I've wondered about, and maybe our city administrator can elaborate. We often have all of our staff folks come up and do most of these pieces. And some of them could have been something that you as a city administrator, maybe because your purview, but it falls within their area. Do you see, then maybe in your previous positions, were you kind of giving more of these than perhaps you see at Willmar? And is that something that maybe if it's not the way, if it's much more common where the city administrator handles some of those pieces, would we be willing to move in that direction? Because that would also speed up the process, I believe, and take some pressure off of our staff.
Yeah, I would say that the city of Willmar has decentralized down to the department head level. And, half the things that are on the agenda probably should be coming through the administrator. I've sat here and I've talked to a couple of department heads and I said, I could have done that. That really is not a, department head level thing. That was my job. But I think because of the administrators, I think coming and going over the last few years, it's just fallen down to the department heads to do that activity. Many things should just be the administrator's responsibility to do, to voice that and explain it in more detail. So, yeah, I would agree.
I'm just going to pile on here. We certainly can do that as we're giving our committee reports if we just agree that it goes to the administrator first. And then the administrator, because now I will go to a department director or I'll go to the city attorney, where if we just send everything to the administrator, because the administrator is who works for us. These guys work for the administrator, and the city attorney works for us. But if we ran everything through the administrator, then that would clearly establish a chain of command, both visually and verbally, because I think there's a lot of stuff that happens where, and I'm guilty of it myself. I had a situation that happened, I don't know if the chief is here or not, happened over the weekend where I got chewed out for something that happened, and so I just called the chief. Well, it happened on Friday. I knew Brian was gone, and it's something that had to be taken care of right away. Well, I just called the chief. Well, I didn't have my computer because they were fixing it. Not a long story. Anyways, if everything goes through the administrator, then the administrator is the funnel. And it might be something to do with planning and development, but he wants finance to take care of it. And he then controls it, or the administrator controls it. I think that's a good way to do business. The other thing I think is that we need to, before we ended up with this revolving door with administrators, we did the majority of all of the reports were generated by staff and the administrator. I mean, now we're having the city attorney draft a lot of the resolutions. And we're paying big money for that. And I mean, you can talk to the city finance director, and I mean, he talked to me during the budgeting period. I mean, our labor numbers are through the roof. I'm sorry, our attorney numbers are through the roof. And that's because we're having our attorney do everything, where before a lot of that was done by staff. And, I think we direct that to the administrator. The administrator can say, okay, I can have a staff member do this, rather than always going to the city attorney. And I think a lot of that, I'm probably the one guilty for it, but a lot of that happened around the time that the Rice Hospital thing happened. And then we were going to the city attorney because it was attorney-to-attorney conversations. And then once you get on the horse, you have a hard time getting bucked off. So, but.
Mr. Mayor, and I'll just interject here. And then you've got the Y project, which the city attorney was working overtime on. The number of documents that you're going to see at the next city council meeting, I mean, they showed up today at the city clerk's computer and mine, and it's like, that's a lot of stuff. And you got to be relying on attorney to attorney. There's nobody on staff is going to be working those things through. That's all legal stuff. And so you got a couple of big projects, and I'm comfortable with having the city attorney review things. I mean, a resolution's a resolution for all practical purposes. And so we can write it up, send it for review, and I guarantee you, review costs you a whole lot less than saying, I need a resolution and you have to make it from scratch, because then, there's some things we can do here. But I think just through whatever reasons, there's been a reliance on the department heads. And I would encourage to get back to, looking to the city administrator for the initial. And if you don't understand it, then I'll say, Mr. Elkins, could you explain this in more detail? So it's good to have them here, but I don't know that they necessarily have to be here every meeting, because there may not be stuff for them to that's even in their area.
I know one of the things when I started as mayor 4.5 years ago was to get less reliance on having our staff have to be at all the meetings. And, the committee meetings they have to be at, but, I agree with Brian 100% here that, he can handle, or the administrator should be able to handle all of these items that come up. And we shouldn't be playing gotcha with staff of asking a question that nobody's going to know where the heck it came from, and then everybody's scrambling trying to find an answer. If they're here, it's easy to ask them the question. If they're not here, it's easy for the administrator to say, I have to check, I'll get back with you, I'll send you an email tomorrow.
Yep.
You're going to need your city clerk, you're going to need, it'd be nice if we didn't need police officers here all the time, but we need our administrator here. And then if you've got something big on the agenda, I guess probably our public works director is going to be the one that has to be here the most. But the rest of it can all be handled by the administrator. You got to present the MS4, you have to present of course, you could, your public works chair could present your street projects with support from the administrator. Go ahead.
Well, I'll pile on one more time, and I'll just speak from my experience on labor, is we have a great HR director. She can easily get up and do all of those presentations, and maybe you look forward to all of the personnel policy changes that we talk about. However, the city administrator is at all of our meetings as well. He has the same information, so he could easily present that, and if she had something to add afterwards, great. Then other things happen where the labor committee gets pulled into a lot of closed sessions that are not our choice. The attorney says we have to go into session. It would be nice if that came from the city administrator, because otherwise it looks as if oh, the council is in closed session again. Well, it's because the city attorney told us to go into closed session. And so it clarifies position. I know when we do our evaluations at the end of the year, we often don't have enough to evaluate necessarily the administrator and all those aspects because he isn't doing those aspects of the position. And so if it's a natural thing, I think this is a natural flow to get us back to that piece. I think this is a natural way of doing things, and I think that the city administrator is the natural conduit to bring those things to the council. There's certain things that perhaps not. I mean, I know he was part of the flood mitigation, but I think we probably would have heard from somebody else as far as that insurance program was concerned from time to time. Those are the experts, but following a process and a logical progression is always good in my book.
All I'll say to that is that I agree with what you said, everything you said, actually. But I think that our staff are going to be presenting to our committee chairs. We went back to the committee structure. That then should empower those people to do that.
They do.
So, Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you. I don't have any issues with that. I think the reality with some of the things we experienced with finance is that our current administrator is only here 3 days a week. And so there are sometimes documents that have to be prepared. It's great to be able to rely on the fact that the city administrator has reviewed the document and that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And so I would hope that we can transition to that and that he is allowed to work with staff for what the best ways to do that is. And just to make sure that we have the information complete to make our decisions.
Yeah, all reports are supposed to be into the administrator's office by noon. It's noon, right, on Wednesday? And so if people are following, I know not all of them are, but if everybody's following the rules, then those reports would be in prior to the administrator leaving for the week.
Yeah, that's for the city council meeting, but what happens like with finance on Thursday, I've left Wednesday already, but rest assured that I've had the discussions of what needs to happen with, Mr. Okins, and he may prepare the document, and I may not necessarily see it, but we always have an understanding of what direction we're headed.
Well, in order for an item to be on the agenda, it has to be 3 days before the meeting to meet the open meeting law posting requirement.
That's always the hope.
And I guess I live in a different world. Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's why it's important to have a city administrator that knows what he's doing and actually wants to work. We've had a revolving door here for the last 5-6 years.
5 years.
And I remember when I first got on the council, I was directed, if you have an issue, you contact the city administrator. He'll say if you should contact the department head, or he would talk to the department head, and they would give me a call. I remember one time there was one city councilman that wasn't allowed to talk to any department heads. He was banned by the administrator.
Yep.
So we need to get back into that routine.
I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah, I think we have too much, I think we've had too much circumventing the administrator going on. Okay, additional questions or comments? Okay, this is a mini retreat, and so under the mini retreat format, if anybody had anything else they wanted to say, we could do that. This is not a special council meeting, this is a retreat. So if there's anything else anybody would want to talk about, we certainly could do that. Otherwise, on my agenda, it says it's time to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Councilmember Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to remind everybody that we have a walk going on this October 5th, starting at 9 o'clock down at Goodness. It's going to be a Celebrate Our Diversity Walk, and a local citizen group put this together, and they're pulling people together from the community. I understand that the high school is going to be involved with their group, and they're going to meet downtown. They're going to walk around the downtown and then end up back at where they started. So it should be a lot of fun. Hopefully the weather cooperates, and it's called Celebrate Our Diversity Walk, October 5th, 2019, starting at 9 a.m. at the Goodness. And there'll be 2 speakers, Ahmadi Gusar and Jessica Roloff. So hope you all can make it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I will try to make it, but that's the grand opening also for Kohl's at the same time. So, I've been asked to make a few comments there. So.
Sure, we can appreciate that.
Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
You don't need a motion, do you? You just,
Oh, okay, this is just a retreat. Okay, yeah. Well, it is on the agenda.
all right.
Okay. We're done.
I don't think, yeah.
City Hall being 27 million.